Yeah, so let's move on to some of these more demographic forces that are driving housing demand. So we looked at the factors. What about some of the trends that you can use to look ahead a little bit and see specifically what's driving multifamily demand? And this is just a very quick add to last week's conversation, which talked about how short-term data becomes a little bit less useful in the context of these economic transitions that are really quick, and how maybe long-term trends like demographic trends can be useful. Last week, the specific example was Marcus and Millichap used medical office, and they talked about the aging boomer generation said medical office demand is going to increase. Let's look at these long-term demands with the boomers that are aging. And this week, they're talking about multifamily and the millennial generation. Millennials are getting older, as you can see here. And the average age is 34. The median age of marriage is 29. And traditionally, you buy that house and you live that American dream. But home prices are not going up. Let's skip to the part where it has that graph there. Home prices are not going up. And that age is getting older. So let's look. See the home price. The home payment is now at $3,098 when it used to be in 2020 closer to what 1.5 or I'm sorry, like 1.6. Let's see, 1,600. Now it's at 3,000. So that's almost double the home payment, I guess. And rent has actually not changed that much at all. Really, from 1.4 to 1.8. So 4,000 versus. I don't know the percentage change, but you really see it in this graph here where the rent growth bar looks very flat, the rent growth line looks very flat, and the line that represents increasing monthly home payments has sharply risen. I'm actually pretty surprised that it's gone up that much. Let's say it's gone up by 1.6 to 3. That is, it's almost double. That's crazy. But the other thing that's happening is, as a result, then the average age at which people make their first home purchase has gotten older because home prices are increasing so much more. Wow, marriage at 29, home purchase almost 10 years later at 38. That is meaning, as a result, and this is something that we've heard a lot, is that people are remaining renters. This is a tangible data point that's a little bit easier for me to grasp than just the general idea. And again, we're waiting on that data that will say what the clear difference is when home prices when the gap between rents and home prices goes up this much. How much does that drive apartments? But it seems like it has, and maybe the data of like extending the age of your first home purchase is one that's like probably the most objective at this point. So yeah, really interesting. A comment on last week's video asked why job growth numbers for Austin, Texas were not positively correlated with rent growth, and it's because supply was gone up so much. Home builders are not building enough here, and that's what the kind of end of this video is. And John Chang's calling for stronger rental demand in the next 5 years, because no matter if it's the single family home market or the multifamily market, there's not going to be enough building that happens either this year or maybe the years to come. But I'll have to keep an eye out and see what the longer term trends are for starts and completions and what the apartment and single family home supply is going to look like. But it doesn't look like we're building enough. And that's where I wanted to, just to return to that comment on last week's video. And the reason why job growth numbers are less positively correlated with rent growth in Austin, Texas, which has very strong job growth numbers, is because they had an enormous amount of supply, and supply just overtook it as the top primary influence of rent growth. But that may return to there may be a greater balance in the future.
Yeah, I think something that kind of gets a little bit lost in this is, specifically with millennials, I'm sure it probably applies to a little bit of the generation above, but millennials on down to Gen Z and really generations for the foreseeable future, unless they get this under control. There are other monthly payments that are happening in addition to what would be a mortgage and rent check for the millennials, being largely student loans.
Yeah.
And especially as we reach a point where they're not able to afford the down payment and the interest rates are getting things to a point where, combined with not being able to afford the down payment or putting down less of a down payment with rates,
Yeah.
that higher payment is just going to be too much to swallow when you're trying to pay off a student loan or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that plays a big role. I don't have specific data to point to like how much of a role it plays, but I think that's like millennials, I would have to think, are kind of that first generation where it's like that's becoming too much of a burden for them, that they've had to push off some of the purchases that generations prior were really quick to make, or I shouldn't say really quick.
Yeah, because of the cost of higher education increasing so much quicker than wages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's in addition to just housing supply and everything that is typically tracked. That's, I'm curious to see what role that plays moving forward.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think it's going to get it. I think it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, yeah, and that's ultimately what kind of where John Chang lands a little bit is like the housing supply shortage. The relative shortage is not going away anytime soon. And I was listening to another podcast earlier that talked about the same thing. It's like this is on everyone's mind, and no one is optimistic that we're going to get the housing supply that we need. It's funny because at the beginning of the year we were thinking that rates were going to be the thing that prevented building, and now we have questionable tariff and situation where that may, that's a drag, and this economic uncertainty that's also makes it difficult for builders. So it's a little bit more overdetermined than it used to be when it comes to the construction industry. Yeah. So wanted to have that kind of connect that these long-term forces with the more personal factors. So we're talking about the demographics as in general, these big groups, and then and I liked that tie-in with the individual focus of the that Fannie Mae survey on what really makes you interested in a home.
Well, but if we factor in the potential for just student debt payments. Mm-hmm. I wonder how much of a role that plays, going back to the previous survey where people are talking about their current place being more than fine for them, and how many people are pushing off that first home purchase because I know Dave Ramsey fans don't want to hear this, but how many people are thinking, I'm not really interested in making that jump to a higher monthly payment and getting a mortgage when I'm tired of taking public transportation to work every day. My current situation in my apartment or the house that I rent or whatever is just fine.
Yeah.
Instead of taking the train, I would finally like to have a car, or I would like to stop driving the car that I've had that's falling apart. Like to get a newer car or a better car.
Yeah.
And just kind of what purchases are now being pushed at, like, what are the purchases that normally either would not have taken place or they would have happened well before a home purchase, that now people are just saying, like, I'm going to push a home purchase back even further.
Yeah.
Because not to dwell on this, but like, yeah, I'm tired of taking the train every day.
That's a really good point. Yeah, yeah. And the fact that there's a little bit of there's a lot of a squeeze now is only reemphasizes how important each of those individual individual decisions can be. And like, yeah, if I didn't have a car but I was thinking about buying a house, I'd like the car.
Yeah.
And replace the car with a lot of different things that you want. Maybe they're just making different decisions there. However, I think owning a home is still obviously something that a lot of people want. It's a goal for people, goal for a lot of renters, and we'll see how that shakes out, especially as the affordability challenges are making it more and more difficult for that to happen for people.